I'm Ryan Ponce Pacpaco, your today's moderator. We have with us today a distinguished panel of speakers who will address various topics of interest. Allow me to introduce them. Of course, the Young Guns Roadshow Manager, Deputy Speaker, and Quezon 2nd District Representative David J.J.C. Suarez, Malasakit at Bayanihan Party List Representative Anthony Rolando T. Goles Jr., House Assistant Majority Leader and Zambales 1st District Representative Jefferson F. Konghun, and One Rider Party List Representative Rhodes L. Gutierrez. Before we open the floor to questions, I'm inviting our speakers to make their short opening remarks.
Well, again, magandang umaga po sa ating lahat. Welcome to another week of legislative work. Congress is set to put into action a lot of important legislation in the next 3 days. Alam niyo naman po yung nakalipas na linggo, marami din po tayong natalakay at naaprubahan. So nagpapasalamat po ako sa lahat ng mga kasama, kaibigan natin sa media at muli niyo po kaming binigyan ng pagkakataon para ma-update po kayo sa mga kaganapan at usapin na mangyayari sa atin ngayon sa linggong ito dito sa Kongreso. Maraming salamat.
Good morning. It's going to be a busy and exciting week. Maraming trabaho na mangyayari ngayon sa Kongreso. Mga trabaho, mga pinaghirapang ipapasa ng mababang kapulungan ngayong linggo na ito na makakatulong sa ating mga kababayan. So maraming salamat at sasamahan nyo kami sa mga proseso at trabaho dito sa Congress.
Magandang umaga. We hope that we can shed light to all the questions that you would want us to answer. For me, particularly anything about healthcare reforms in Congress. Pwede ho kayo magtanong and nandito po kami para mapagbigay alam rin sa ating mga kababayan kung ano ginagawa natin sa Kongreso. Maraming pong salamat.
Good morning. I guess all we have to say is thank you again to our media friends for joining us today. We hope to shed light, especially on this last week of work that we have before we suspend the session for the Holy Week. And we hope to be able to answer your questions today. Thank you.
Thank you, sirs. With that, let's open the floor for questions. I'd like to acknowledge Isa Bendaño Mali from GMA DCBB.
Good morning po, Congressman. Para po kay D.S. Suarez, over the weekend po kasi may binanggit si Majority Leader Manix Dalipe na once approved ng House of Representatives yung RBH number 7, may possibility na idiretso sa COMELEC. Pero may sinabi din po si STS Gonzales na hihintayin pa rin yung approval ng Senate. So ano po ba talaga? And may consensus na rin ho ba kayo about it? Ano po yung gagawin talaga ng House of Representatives?
So, maraming salamat sa katanungan mo. No? So, I think, number one, dito nakikita talaga natin na may ambiguity talaga sa Constitution because the Constitution only requires 3/4 vote of Congress. Tayo po dito sa Kongreso, we're set to approve this on third and final reading on Wednesday. And I hope that our counterparts in the Senate will find enough time in their hands to approve the same. We will be going on a break, and I look forward to the opportunity where both leaders of the House and leaders of the Senate can meet and finally decide on the proper course of action with regards to both RBH. Kasi yung Senate nasa RBH 6, tayo naman may RBH 7, tayo patapos na. So, kailangan lang po talaga natin malaman sa Senate kung kailan at kung anong buwan may papasa nila yung version nila. Ang mahalaga naman po talaga dito is mapagbotohan to ng ating mga mamayan. Ang dulo parati nito will be a plebiscite. So it is important for us to allow the Filipino people to decide on the proposed amendments. And looking at what has happened last week, where a U.S. delegation recently visited, very positive po yung outlook ng international business community on the proposed amendments on our constitutions. In fact, they're very much excited about the restrictions that will be removed to allow more foreign direct investments coming in. And this was again echoed by the President in his recent trip to Germany and the Czech Republic, where another $4 billion of pledges in investment to our country was also secured. Not to mention, this week, the Philippines is set to host an important delegation from the World Economic Forum. So this sends a clear signal to the world and to the economic industry players that the Philippines is open for more direct investments. Kaya napakahalaga po talaga na makapag-usap na kagad ang Senado at ang Kongreso para in finality, ma-decide na po yung susunod na hakbang.
Kaya lang po, DS Suarez, sorry po sa follow-up question, Kuya Ryan.
Kaya go ahead, Lisa.
Sabi po ng Senate, wala silang gagawing action regarding Chacha this week. Actually, hindi rin daw po kasama sa agenda ata ng subcommittee yung Chacha. Papaano po kaya yun?
Siguro maganda na i-maximize natin yung Holy Week break na we can do some self-reflection, we can pray for enlightenment, we can hope for discernment so that we can meet kasi talagang importante na po ito para sa ating bansa. At nakikita nyo naman yung excitement ng business community pagdating sa restrictions na pinag-uusapan na tatanggalin po natin sa ating konstitusyon. So, ito pong pagkakataon na makakapagpahinga, sa palagay ko, maganda rin pagkakataon na makapag-usap din yung Senado at ang Kongreso para malaman na talaga yung susunod na hakbang patungkol sa lifting ng restrictions sa ating Constitution.
Last question na lang po. May mga grupo na rin po, actually pati makabayan, nagsabi na once approved ng House yung RBH 7, may possibility na iakyat nila sa Supreme Court. Your thoughts about it po?
Well, in my opinion, it's one of the options, yung sinabi ni Majority Floor Leader Manix Dalipe. Pero mas maganda kung aprubahan ng Senado yung RBH 6, no? Kasi, syempre, inaantay na rin namin sila. Kasasabi lang nga ni DS Suarez, no, na aprubahan ng House sa Wednesday yung RBH 7. So, mas maganda pa rin na aprubahan ng Senate yung kanilang version ng RBH 6, no? Excited na lahat ng tao, marami na nag-aantay. Sana makita nila yung sense of urgency na sana bilisan nila yung pagpasa. Kasi trabaho ng bawat Pilipino ang pinag-uusapan dito, no? Yung pagpasok ng mga negosyante para makapagbigay ng trabaho sa ating mga kababayan. So sana kunin ng Senado yung oras ngayong Holy Week para naman mapag-isipan nila at sana naman yung maramdaman nila yung konsensya dahil talagang kailangan na ito ng bawat Pilipino.
If I may add, kung okay lang, DS. Kung meron tayong tinatawag na road less traveled, meron rin tayong tinatawag na the road that nobody has traveled. And I think we have come to this point in time where the next steps can be a lot of steps na possible. It can be a bifurcation of so many steps. Kasi wala pang nakakaabot sa ganitong punto ang Kongreso. Makikita natin ngayon na maraming katanungan, papunta ba sa COMELEC, papunta ba sa Supreme Court, all these things are all possible. Ang pinaka-importante natin ngayon na ma-realize ng lahat ng mga legislators, both in the Senate and in Congress, na maraming problema sa ating bansa, katulad sa akin na sa healthcare ako. Doon sa Health Committee, palagi namin sinasabi, bakit kulang ng 90,000 na doktor ang Pilipinas? Bakit 300,000 na nurses ang nawala sa Pilipinas? Kung itatanong mo lahat yan, nag-aaral pa lang ang mga estudyante, ang sinasagot nila, kasi kailangan namin kumita para sa pamilya. So akala namin sa health committee, ang solusyon nasa health committee. Hindi po pala. Ang solusyon, isa sa mga solusyon and major solution are also part dito sa pinag-uusapan nating constitutional change. Bakit kamo? Yung tatlong provision na gusto natin pag-usapan, yung provision ng public utilities, education, at saka provision ng advertisement, halimbawa. When you prosper those industries, siguro ang maapektuhan yan would be easily 10 to 20% of our population. Or it will redound to what? 20 million people having a better life in the country. When you say 20 million people or 20% of population additional will be having a better life in our country, ano ibig sabihin yan? Mas marami silang perang pwedeng igastos. Mas marami silang pera pwedeng pambayad sa doktor, sa ospital, kung nagkakasakit sila. And when that happens, then more economic benefit will go to the healthcare sector. Makikita ng mga doktor, ba't ako aalis? Nandito, gumaganda ang kabuhayan ng ating bansa. So, I'm here to talk about the economic prosperity, nakaangkla yan doon sa healthcare problems natin, yung solusyon para sa healthcare problems natin. And that is the reason why we in the medical community, I'm not saying, I'm hasty generalizing everybody in the health industry, no? But ako, dahil nakikita ko, mas marami ako information sa kanila, nakikita ko that this can help solve the problem of migration of doctors in the country. Marami pong salamat.
In addition to that po, I guess, and just tying it back to the question po, no, about yung dun sa Makabayan Block. Well, it's important to remember po, no, like we mentioned and we've talked about before, the statements of Majo, si Congressman Dalipe, on how we will proceed forward. These are speculations, legal theoretics po, no. So that's why, as rightly put by Congoles, it can take any which way. Maraming steps that are still to be taken from this point on. And to say that, it really shows that we are now reaching a point that has been unprecedented po, no? But moving forward, I think if there would be groups that are eager to file a case, and we already anticipated this and we welcome it, kasi nga po, we really need a determination by the Supreme Court. Ever since from the start, since the filing of RBH 7, RBH 6 in the Senate, there was always a question of procedure, and we've always said that any which way, whether you take the more traditional interpretation of 3/4 of separate, or you take the Bernas ruling, where we come up with our own rules and 3/4 paka jointly, either which way that you go, there will always be that question in the Supreme Court. And we definitely welcome po the groups that are excited. The only thing po, no, for the legal theoretics that we have to consider is our passing on Wednesday, if, since we see naman parang it's going that way, but if it is passed on Wednesday, would that be a sufficient trigger for the Supreme Court to take cognizance of this case? Yan lang po siguro yung tanong namin, but definitely, I hope that they do consider that as a trigger. Para while, as the SJJ mentioned, that over the Holy Week, we would still have to consider the thoughts and considerations of our colleagues in the Senate, but while that is pending, hopefully the Supreme Court would start the legal process to finally come up with a definite answer to these lingering questions. Because all of these are important, but we're all moving towards the same goal naman. And at the end of the day, any which way that the Supreme Court may rule, tao rin po ang magdedesisyon. It will end up in a plebiscite, and that's the most important thing. Yun na po.
Yeah, at saka gusto ko lang dagdagan yung sinabi ni Rog, no, at saka sinabi ni Congressman Goles. So, hindi mo talaga maiiwasan na darating to sa Supreme Court. Parati po yung may constitutional challenge. In fact, during our deliberations, ilang beses po yan inulit ng mga resource persons natin. Dahil nga, hindi pa po ito na experience, nararanasan. So marami po talagang katanungan na dapat po talagang mabigyan ng kaliwanagan pagdating sa proseso, pagdating sa paraan, pagdating sa substance, pagdating sa form. So it is also vital, that's why it is important for us to work with the Senate on this so that we can limit the possible constitutional challenge RBH 6 and RBH 7 will face. Kasi mangyayari at mangyayari yon. Kaya mahalaga na talagang makapag-usap yung leadership ng Senate at yung leadership ng House para mas makita natin kung ano yung daan na mas maganda with less impediments. Although, borrowing the term that Congressman Goles has used, still uncharted waters, but at least the fastest route to get it approved and get it to the COMELEC and have the plebiscite in the soonest possible time.
Salamat po.
Thank you. From ABS-CBN, RG Cruz, you are recognized.
Sir, I have 2 points lang for DS Juarez. How serious is the leadership na idiretso sa COMELEC ito after third reading approval, even pending the action of the Senate?
What we said earlier, everything is on the table. But I think the best route for us to take is to work with the Senate.
Okay.
Because we want to lessen any legal obstacle RBH 6 and RBH 7 will eventually face. Tulad nga ng sinabi kanina na may mga sektor na handa ng maghabla ng kaso sa Supreme Court. So mas maganda kung maghahabla ng kaso at may mga legal questions na kailangan mabigyan ng kaliwanagan, maganda yung both houses mag-usap para ma-address na kagad natin ito moving forward.
Sir, but you are assuming that the Senate will cooperate. But what if they don't? Because their body language can make you doubt that they would.
Well, purely speculative, RG. I think the Senate will move and will move forward. We're still very hopeful and that they will see why it is important, and I think we all realize why it is necessary. Last week, none other than the U.S. Secretary of Commerce, Gina Raimundo, mentioned it twice in her speech that the U.S. delegation was very much excited with the talks of lifting economic restrictions. And I'm sure this message has reached the Senate. And I'm sure the senators will work and will find a way to get the necessary votes so that they can get their version of the RBH 6 approved. In fact, kami dito sa House, we're willing to work with the Senate just so that we can, get enough votes. And if we need to convince them, if we need to talk to them, if we need to knock on their doors and ask for their help, I think Congress and congressmen are willing to do that just so that we can get the amendments put in action just so that para may push na kagad natin yung plebiscito sa madaling panahon.
I'll move to my next point. Is yung SMNI franchise revocation bill po ba, is it going to be on third reading later or also on Wednesday? And meron na po bang word on the order of arrest for Pastor Quiboloy?
Well,
I'll allow the author of the resolution to speak.
thank you, DS. Well, on SMNI po, no, if you can recall, last week we were able to pass it already on second reading, and we would anticipate that it would be tackled this week. As to the specific date, I won't be able to tell. It depends on the Rules Committee, of course, because it depends on the scheduling. But we are hopeful that it would be this weekend based on assessment of the room. I think it would easily pass po, no, on the floor. On the question po on the detention of Pastor Quiboloy, of course, if we would recall during the committee hearing that he was cited in contempt and there was already an order for his arrest, of course, pending the plea of his attorney, Attorney Topacio, which, by the way, for everyone's reference, baka di po nila maalala, Attorney Topacio made a pleading that since he was meeting with his client the day after the committee, he asked that the detention order be deferred. So as far as the committee is concerned, the detention order was indeed deferred. But unfortunately, of course, I have to double check, pero sa pagkakaalam po ng representasyon na ito sa committee, still they did not receive word from Attorney Topacio. So it seems to be, unfortunately, it reaffirms the suspicion of some of the congressmen then, especially si Kong Pimentel, that it seems to be a delaying tactic. So, of course, we understand as a lawyer, that is the duty of Attorney Topacio, but it is deeply disappointing, no, that we have been led down that path. But with that said, since we have already submitted the committee report and on passed it on second reading, the detention order will now come down to the Secretary General. But as we see it, it's a special circumstance kasi while we have this pending detention order, there is also one in the Senate for a hearing that is actually continuing. No? Kasi so if we take a look at ours, tapos na po yung franchise revocation, although it might be considered that since continuing pa naman yung inquiry on fake news and red tagging, they could still be included. Pero parang baka mas appropriate that the detention order be with the Senate. So again, this is all up to the leadership, hindi pa tayo sigurado, but it might be more relevant for the Senate to now take a lead. Of course, if the House leadership through the Secretary General does decide to seek out the detention order, and if there's no need for him here, the custody could then be passed on to Senate rin. So that's another option on why the House might still pursue the detention despite passing on second reading. So just like RBH 7, unprecedented, pero it remains to be seen po. I hope that's able to clarify kahit papano yung katanungan.
Are there, okay, RG, okay na? Are there any other comments from Kong J and Kong Goles from RG Cruz questions?
Yeah, ako naman bilang nag-deliver ng privilege speech last year about fake news peddling ng SMNI, natutuwa po ako sa naging takbo ng Committee ng Franchise, and I would like to congratulate Congressman Gaston Bunting for properly handling and managing. Sinabi ko nga doon sa last hearing, ito na yata yung pinakamatagal na hearing dahil inabot ng 4 na buwan. Ganun pong pagpapakita ng leniency, ng kindness, ng generosity, ang Committee ng Franchise pagdating sa issue ng SMNI. Now, unfortunately for SMNI, hindi po nila napatunayan na hindi sila lumabag sa mga probisyon ng franchise that was provided to them. So therefore, it was voted that their franchise be revoked. And if I'm not mistaken, we're set to vote on this on third and final reading this week. So, thank you.
In my case, simple. Just follow the rule of law. We are all dictated by our laws, and we'll just follow it.
Thank you. Rosalie Cas from UNTV.
Good morning po, Kong DS po. Regarding pa rin po sa economic chacha, kasi po Senate President Subiri made a statement, public statement with the President in Czech Republic, and he said they are on track on passing RBH 6. Pero earlier po you said pwedeng gamitin po yung congressional break para magnilay-nilay, mag-meet ang House and Senate leadership. Ibig sabihin po ba nito ay hindi pa rin po kayo pabor dun sa timeline ng Senate kasi they still have 3 more hearings at plano po nilang pagbotohan sa plenaryo before SONA?
Well, unang-una on the point na sinabi ni Senate President Mix that they're on track, we're very happy with that. That just goes to show that the Senate is really geared towards having it approved. So with regards to the details on when and to the issue on how we're gonna have it transmitted to COMELEC. Siguro that issue will be taken up during the break dahil mabibigyan po ng sapat na oras at panahon yung leadership of both houses to meet and decide. So we take that very positively. With Senate President issuing that statement with the President, that just goes to show that there is indeed enough reason to be positive that the Senate will approve RBH 6.
Thank you po. Konting details lang po dun sa mangyayari sa Wednesday. Nominal voting po yung pag-pass on third and final reading po. Can you walk us through the process po? And how many votes? 3/4, it's more than 230 po ba?
Yeah, so nominal voting tayo sa Wednesday. But as of now, more than 280 congressmen have already co-authored RBH 7. So, kung dumaan man to sa nominal voting, approved na rin in principle dahil sa dami ng nag-co-author sa RBH 7. At kung titingnan din natin, yung consistency ng position ng House members patungkol sa amendments ng ating economic provisions ng ating saligang batas. More or less, ganun din po yung bilang ng authors and co-authors nung ipinasa po natin yung RBH 6 last year. Kaya natutuwa po tayo na patuloy pa rin yung pagkakaisa at suporta na pinakikita ng ating mambabatas patungkol sa issue ng amendments ng ating saligang batas.
Pwede ako mag-comment lang.
Yes, sir. Go ahead, sir.
You know, the genius of our Constitution is it can make a mistake. And that is the reason why noong 1987, ito lang personal opinion ko. Noong 1987, when the Constitution was framed and made, hindi naman sila nagtalaga ng isang monarchy. Hindi hari ang tinalaga nila na kung saan sumusunod ang lahat ng tao at hindi na makikinig sa tao. Nagtalaga tayo ng isang democratic government na kung saan the government will always ask the people what they want. In the process, kung sinabi ng tao, ng doktor, kailangan siguro mapalakas ang certain provisions ng economy natin nang sa ganun, hindi maubos ang ating mga doktor. Dapat makinig ang gobyerno. At yan po ang proseso na ginagawa natin. So I'm going back, the genius of the Constitution is that it can make mistakes and we can change it the way how our people want it to be changed at kung anong gusto nila ilagay. Thank you.
If I may add, no? Dito rin natin makikita, no? Yung leadership ni Speaker Martin Romualdez na talagang ipinapakita ng Kongreso na we support the leadership of the House at talagang yung sense of urgency, no, para ipasa yung RBH 7 talagang naandyan. So seryoso ang Kongreso para matapos na ito at sana ang pakiusap namin sa Senado, sana tapusin na rin nila ito para at least wala nang problema at maiwasan din yung pagka-question nito sa Korte Suprema.
Just an additional point, no. Just adding to what Kongol has said. I do agree, of course, that the genius of the Constitution is that it allows itself to change. But unfortunately, the framers are only men, and of all the provisions that there could be ambiguity, dun pa po sa revision nagkaroon ng problema. So it just highlights that now, aside from the fact that we are espousing constitutional change to take advantage of the economic provisions, economic position that we are in, it is also a golden opportunity to finally rectify that problem of how to change the Constitution. So we have to lean into the genius of the Constitution. We have to really, we admit that it opens itself to change with the times, but since the process is not perfect, we have to lean into it. And that's why we believe, just tying it in with the question earlier po, no, dun sa Senate, although there, like the previous question mentioned that body language, hindi po pabor yung Senado, but now in this current question, there was a statement by the Senate President that they are hopeful that they will pass it with after 3 more meetings. I think there's still that inkling of possibility, and I do believe that our good colleagues in the Senate understand the importance not only of economic charter change, but for the correction of that inadvertence na tinatawag po, no? So, because I'm pretty sure charter change will be the most important right now given our situation. But as times change, we still have to be flexible. The Constitution has to be flexible. Like we said, it has to lean into that genius of admitting that we can be wrong. What we feel is correct now might be wrong in the future. And if we stick to this definition, this interpretation of constitutional revision na napakahirap, we would just be hamstringing ourselves. So with that, we again appeal to our colleagues in the Senate to give this proper consideration, not only for ourselves now, but for the future generations who might want to consider changing the charter on which this country is based on. Yun lang po.
Thank you. Let us call on Elson Crismorio of Manila Bulletin for his questions.
Hello, Kongs. Good morning po. Some of your colleagues have already commented on this, but just to get your take po, what's your opinion po of these prayer rallies that transition somehow into political rallies and at times anti-government rally pa?
Well, yan nga yung maganda sa atin eh. When 1987 Constitution was framed and was implemented, we had a democratic form of government and we allowed these rallies to happen. For as long as they don't violate any rules or any laws, then we would allow them. Yun lang ang importante. They have to be responsible with what they're doing. If they violate a law, then they can face justice on that. No, so we will allow them. Yun ang tingin on the legislative standpoint, no.
Other comments po? Yes, boss.
Yeah, well, ngayon lang ako nakita at nakapanood ng prayer rally na gano'n, di ba? Kasi usually pag sinabing prayer rally, talagang may mga nagdadasal, may nangangaral. Kaso lang dito mukhang nagkaroon ng pagkakaiba ng anyo ang mga prayer rallies. So, ako ang position ko, I don't think nakakatulong po ito sa takbo ng ating bansa. Ang nais po natin ipakita, stability within the country. And having noise such as this is not helpful, especially we're on track towards recovery from a pandemic. So I would rather focus all our attention and energies on efforts that will help the country grow and stabilize. So sana hindi na madagdagan ito dahil nakikita naman natin na wala naman talagang magandang naidudulot so far. So let's just focus on supporting the administration's objectives and continuing our legislative work so that we can continue to support unity within the country, and number 2, of course, yung bagong Pilipinas na ipinaglalaban ng ating mahal na Pangulo.
In addition to that na lang po, no? Of course, freedom of speech and expression is fundamental in our democracy. And while we may not agree with what people say, we have to respect the right to say it. But with that, speaking of this particular rally, the political speeches that it has ultimately boiled down to would be understandable, but I have to express my deep disappointment in certain statements, certain controversial statements, because we should never allow political dissent to boil down to espousing violence. No, there were some statements that were made by men that seem misogynistic, that would support acts of violence upon particular women, and I think, while they may argue as we know the channel that is behind the rally also, no, SMNI, it just proves our point po no dito sa bill that we're revoking. They would tend to put forward the defense of freedom of speech and expression, but the way by means they utilize it, weaponize it, and espouse and promote violence and lower the standards of discussion is something horrible, I would say. So I would I respect that this would be a political discussion. There would be dissent. That's normal. But the words of which they've used, I express my utmost objection to that. Ilan po.
Well, ngayon lang kami nakakita ng prayer rally na puro mura ang naririnig, no? So, nagpapasalamat din naman ako dahil kahit anong naririnig natin doon, hindi naman pinapatulan, no, ng ating administrasyon. So, mas maganda itigil na lang nila yan dahil wala naman na itutulong sa ating bansa yan. Tingin natin, kukunti na lang talaga yung no? Kukunti na lang talaga yung may gusto ng mga ganyang klaseng gawain, no? At sana ihinto na lang nila at wala naman talaga maitutulong sa bansa. At saka hindi naman talaga prayer rally ang tawag doon dahil talagang walang ginawa kundi puro puot at masasakit na salita yung binibitawan doon sa pagtitipon na yon.
Well, just to point out, I mean, if you would look at the recent numbers of President Bongbong Marcos, they've rebounded. His net satisfaction, his approval rating, his trust rating has again improved. So this goes to show that when we talk about performance, which should be the basis really of every administration, the administration of President Bongbong Marcos is doing very well. So these prayer rallies, quote unquote, are mere distractions. And I do echo the sentiments of Congressman Rog, na sana naman hinay-hinay, medyo lagyan naman na natin ng konting delikadesa sa mga salitang ginagamit dahil hindi po to maganda pakinggan at hindi rin to magandang naririnig, especially ng mga kabataan dahil kung titingnan po natin yung rally, may mga bata din yata doon na involved. I don't think it sets the right model, especially for the younger generation.
I have to ask this since it's been alluded to. Do you demand? Would you demand a public apology from ex-Congressman Glenn Chong for threatening to slap the First Lady?
Without a doubt. I mean, he should. He should. I mean, the words that he uttered against our First Lady are totally uncalled for. He should. So, I don't only demand it, but I think out of common courtesy and basic human nature, I think he should. He may have his misgivings. He may feel bad about certain things in life, but to say that on TV, I think is totally uncalled for. And he should.
I think hindi po sinasampal ang mga babae. Even in rhetorics or even in jokes. As a matter of fact, stricto nga tayo dyan because meron tayong batas laban sa kaharasan against women and children. Hindi po sila sinasampal, minamahal po sila.
In addition to that, as I mentioned earlier, I agree and echo the sentiments of D.S. Suarez. I may not be in a position to demand an apology because hindi naman ako yung alluded to. But I think in behalf of all the women that we love, I think all of us should demand an apology from this person. Because never should it be acceptable in furtherance of political rhetoric to allude to violence against women. Lahat naman tayo, may nanay, we have sisters, some of us have daughters. And the question is, do we ngayon, ang lipunan po natin, acceptable na po ba ang ganitong pananalita? Is that what we have come down to? I don't think so. We take a stand, and I think that we, as a people, should demand accountability for statements such as these. Yun lang po.
Tsaka tsaka sa atin ngayon, ano, sa society natin, hindi na makatanggap-tanggap yung kabasusan ng bibig, no? Talagang tama nga ang sinasabi ng aking mga kasama na ang babae minamahal at hindi sinasaktan. So, unsolicited advice, no? Sana bago tayo nagbibitiw ng mga gatong salita, sana pinag-iisipan muna natin mabuti. Dahil katulad nga ng sinasabi natin, hindi lang naririnig din ng mga kabataan yung mga sinasabi natin at sana maging mabuting ehemplo tayo sa ating mga mamamayan.
Sorry, I have one more question po. Regarding pa rin po dun sa rally, we saw Vice President Sara Duterte attend the rally. Regarding that po, do we have any message po for supposed allies in government from taking part in those activities?
Of course, I can't speak for anyone else but myself on this matter. We would respect everyone's right to freedom of expression. I suppose the attendance of certain personalities to the rally could always be construed as a personal exercise of that right. But given the positions that we are in, we have to consider, of course, the intricacies that are involved. We will not, I will not make any calls, but aside from just, I hope that we consider the messaging that it might promote, especially given the statements made in that rally. No? Because when one attends a rally and statements are made, and though you might not personally agree to it, your mere attendance might be misconstrued by other people. So I think that's food for thought lang naman po.
Anybody else po? Wala na po siguro. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Elson. Melales Moras from Channel 4.
Hi, good afternoon po, Kongs.
I doon lang sa point na I think siguro sa mga susunod na mga pagkakataon, malaman din natin yung mga dinadaluhan natin kasi syempre kita nyo naman yung tenor nung prayer rally na yon. I think, very strong yung anti-administration sentiment at sinisigaw ng mga individual na nandun. So, of course, being part of the cabinet of President Bongbong Marcos, so it sends the wrong signal. Especially for me, di ba? Kasi ipinaglaban natin, kaya sila na parehas nanalo dahil sa unity at pagkakaisa. Di dapat yun din yung nakikita natin pagdating sa mga leader natin sa taas na yung pagkakaisa at pagtutulungan. So, yun lang po yung mababanggit ko doon. So, I think, we need to be a little bit more prudent and proper in deciding what events to attend pagdating sa ganung usapin.
Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon po mga Kong. Related pa rin sa RBH 7 and sa recent trip sa Germany and Czech Republic ng administrasyon, ano pong masasabi nyo na umabot sa $4 billion yung naikasang business deals doon at ngayong inaasahan na yung pagpasa natin sa RBH 7 sa third reading? Ano kaya yung magiging epekto nito sa mga susunod pang pagkakataon kapag naisakatuparan na economic charter change? Pwede po kayang madoble pa, matriple pa yung mga ganitong numero na naikakasa ng administrasyon sa ibang bansa?
Well, first of all, sa kaalaman ng lahat, when you talk about the ASEAN region, ang pinaka-bullish na ekonomiya dito sa side natin, sa Asia, is the Philippines. Okay, so yan yung parang hallmark of growth na tinitingnan ng ibang bansa, especially sa Amerika or sa Europe. Sa Amerika at saka sa Europe kasi, humihina ang kanilang ekonomiya. At dahil humihina ang kanilang ekonomiya, gusto nila ngayon maging involved doon sa mga economies na mabilis ang pagtaas ng ekonomiya. At kung titingin ang Germany, ang Czech Republic, and the rest of nations in Europe, pag tumingin sila sa Asia, titingin sila sa ASEAN. At pag tumingin sila sa ASEAN, titingin sila sa Pilipinas. Lalo pa na nalalaman nila na binubuksan natin ang economic provisions ng ating Constitution. Excited sila dyan. And that is the reason why makikita natin na pag nabukas itong economic provisions ng Constitution natin, mas dadami pa lalo ang papasok sa atin ng mga direct foreign investors. Yan po yung ating pananaw dito sa issue na ito. Can you imagine, nung 2020 po, nagkaroon ng pandemic. At nung nagkaroon ng pandemic, para mabuhay po tayo, okay, ang bansa po natin, kailangan po tayong umutang, kailangan tayo gumawa ng mga paraan, maraming paraan para mapagamot ang ating mga kababayan. Ngayon, 2022, binuksan na po ng ating Pangulo, Ferdinand Marcos, ang ating ekonomiya. Kailangan na natin pasiglahin muli ang ekonomiya. Pero hindi po kaya ng ating bansa yan. Kailangan natin ng tulong ng mga foreign direct investors sa ating bansa para makabayad tayo ng utang, para makapagpaaral tayo ng ating mga kabataan, and so on and so forth. Kaya po lumalabas ang ating Pangulo para matugunan yung ganito pangangailangan ng ating bansa. And on the legislative branch of government, we really thank the President for doing these things. Kasi nga, kailangan nga natin ng tulong mula sa ating mga kaibigan sa labas ng bansa. Marami pong salamat.
So I think in relation to the question, 4 billion US dollars is a testament to PBBM's dedication to promoting the country's economic interests and attracting foreign direct investments. Other than that, the president is the best marketing strategist for the country. His foreign trips have indeed blossomed into more interest, more commitments, more foreign direct investments coming into the country. Nabanggit ko kanina yung recent delegation mula sa US. I think that's around 8 billion. You can correct me with that figure, but I think it was around 8 billion na commit po nung US delegation. Yung Germany at saka yung Czech Republic, again, in the billions din po yung papasok sa ating bansa. Nabanggit ko rin po kanina, we're set to host an important delegation from the World Economic Forum that will bring in more investments into the country. So we see all of this from the outside coming in. Now we need to look at ourselves. What do we need to fix in order to realize all of this and to maximize on the opportunities that is presented to us? Kaya nga po napakahalaga na maayos na po talaga natin in finality yung RBH 6 at yung RBH 7 at magkasundo na po yung Senado at yung Kongreso para tuluyan na po natin ma-realize itong mga interest ng mga dayuhan na mag-invest sa Pilipinas. Nakapag-secure din po ng commitment ang ating Pangulo kasama ni Speaker Martin Romualdez pagdating sa mga OFWs na kakailanganin ng Czech Republic at ng Germany. It seems like there is an increasing demand for Filipinos abroad, not only in health, but in all sectors in business. So again, this is testament to the ingenuity, the capacity, and of course, to the qualities of Filipinos when it comes to characteristics na hinahanap ng mga employers sa abroad.
In addition to that lang po, no, and to further the idea that we are putting forward here po, it is my understanding rin na part of the $4 billion deal and even dun sa US trade delegation na some of these industries, kasi may understanding po yung ibang kababayan po natin kapag sinasabi natin foreign direct investment ay papasok po sila dito, magtatayo ng negosyo na dapat negosyo ng Pilipino lamang, tapos magbebenta ng mga produkto sa Pilipino na dapat ang Pilipino ang nagbebenta. But it would seem to be na dito po sa some of these portions of that investment, a big chunk, are mukhang gustong din na mag-locate dito and export their products abroad. So this is a seed for our economy. Hindi lang po ito para sa market ng Pilipino. We are looking to be a leading economy in our area or even in the world. So ang ginagawa po natin ngayon, like we've always said, the President has been very consistent. Right off the bat, 2022 has been inviting foreign investment. And nandito na po yun. The wave is here. Are we ready for it? Yun po yung tanong. And that's why we continue to espouse for RBH 6 in the Senate, RBH 7 here. We have to be able to ride that wave. We've missed the opportunity in the past. We became the sick man of Asia. But that doesn't mean that we are relegated to this position forever. We still have an opportunity. So, kagaya ng ganito, the economic conditions are right. The Philippines is a beautiful country. Islands, we have ports for export, import. It seems to be all of the conditions are there. Are we ready for it? Yan na lang po yung tanong. So with all of this coming in, I think it's time that we take positive action to welcome that. Yun lang po.
Thank you. Just a quick follow-up lang po kay Congressman Goles. Since lagi naman nating na-highlight yung economic impact, and as a medical practitioner, can you just elaborate pa po yung magiging magandang epekto nito sa health sector aside from maiwasang migration sa mga doktor? Ano pa po kaya yung magiging magandang epekto nitong economic chacha sa health aspect naman?
Example po, a premise. May $1 billion ang isang investor na gusto mag-invest sa Pilipinas. Halimbawa sa sektor ng education. An health education institution. Yung $1 billion niya ngayon, ang sabi sa ating saligang batas na kailangan 60% o 40% lang ang pagmamay-ari niya. $1 billion ng pera niya, bibigay niya sa Pilipinas para mag-invest, tapos babalikan siya ng Pilipino, hindi ka pwede mag-ari ng $1 billion mo. Kailangan 40% lang pagmamay-ari mo. Di ba parang kung ikaw ang investor doon, ang daya. $1 billion nilagay ko, 40% lang meron ako. Ano ngayon ang konsekwensya nito? Let's say, for example, that educational institution, halimbawa, it's a university na gusto mag-invest or health and research facility worth billions and billions of dollars in researching, let's say, medicines or researching a lot of things. Kung nailagay yan sa Pilipinas at nag-prosper yan, halimbawa, kasi nagbebenta siya sa ibang bansa, sa ASEAN or sa Asia or sa buong mundo, lalago ang negosyo na yan. Mas maraming tao ang maha-hire, mas maraming tao ang magkakaroon ng pera, mas maraming tao pupunta sa doktor para magpagamot, maraming tao ang pupunta sa ospital para maggamot. Tataas ang sweldo ng nurses, tataas ang sweldo ng doctors. And of course, the research and technology na ginagawa to begin with ng kumpanya na yan, maaangat ang ating kaalaman dito sa healthcare sector ng Pilipinas. Isang example lang po yan. Another case in point. Let's say, for example, itong medical tourism. Ang medical tourism, because of certain, hahanapin ko yung certain provision, no, na nagre-restrict halimbawa ng pag-unlad sa medical tourism. And I'm sure meron dyan. Bakit hindi umuunlad ang medical tourism natin? Pag magre-retire ang isang dayuhan pupunta dito, let's say for example, gustong mamahinga dito hanggang mawala siya sa mundo na ito, halimbawa, hindi siya pwede mag-own ng isang property. Bakit po dito magre-retire yung mga dayuhan na yan? Sayang po yan. Malaking tulong sa healthcare sector yan. Bakit? Dahil kasi sa geriatrics, there's a practice in medicine ng geriatrics, nursing homes, etc., etc. So in other words, pupunta dito, gusto nating umunlad ang medical tourism, pero hindi natin binibigyan ng pagkakataon itong mga dayuhan na to na magkaroon ng property dito. Di parang sinabi mo na you're not walking your talk. Diba? Pinapunta mo kami dito, hindi pala pwede kami bumili ng mga properties na kung saan kami mamamahinga sana habang buhay. So these are the things that affects the healthcare sector na hindi natin nakikita. Palagi natin fino-focus na baka may political provision na gustong palitan. You know, all these things na fear rather than care ang tingin ko dito. Tanggalin po natin yung pagkatakot, di ba? Kasi the problem is real. The problem is economics. The problem, gutom tayo. The problem, lumalabas sa mga doktor sa Pilipinas. Iwasan na po natin yan. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Marian Enriquez from Channel 5 for her questions.
Sorry, sir. Makikiklarify lang po. Kasi, di ba, since kanina sinabi niyo po everything is on the table, pero hindi pa natin sure kasi kung ano yung mangyayari sa Senate. Pero, hindi po ba pag resolution of both houses, pareho verbatim, word for word po dapat ang siste? Paano po ba yun, sir, kung yung way of voting natin, RBH 6 explicitly says, yung Senate voting separately sa atin, inadopt po natin kung ano yung nasa Constitution. Paano po ba yun, sir? Yung BICAM, wala na po ba yun on the table? Or yun nga, sinasabi nyo na pag-uusapan pa over the whole week?
Yeah. So I think the mere fact that RBH 7 mirrors RBH 6 addresses a lot of issues pagdating sa disagreeing provisions. Usually, nagkakaroon tayo ng BICAM pag maraming mga provisions ang kailangan pagkasunduan pagdating sa House at pagdating sa Senate version. But insofar as it's a mirror resolution ng isa't isa, so sa palagay ko, kukonti na lang po yung diskusyon pagdating sa punto na maaprubahan na po ito ng Senado. But ang mahalaga talaga dito ay magkausap ang leadership ng Senado at leadership ng Kongreso para malaman talaga yung way forward. And the break will be a perfect opportunity for both houses to meet, whether it be in small or big groups, to decide on what will be the necessary steps once we resume session on the latter part of April. So again, thank you for your questions. And indeed, these are some of the questions that we need to address. But we can only address these questions once we meet our counterparts in the Senate.
In addition to what DS Suarez said po, no, I guess on the question of BICAM, actually precisely we're at the limbo right now. Although we understand where you're coming from po, no, because usually when it's couched as resolution of both houses, it has a connotation that they're counterpart based on the rules. But we have to understand and delineate that what we're exercising here is constituent power. We are not necessarily following strictly yung legislative powers of Congress, which is the traditional na meron tayong panukala dito, panukalang batas, BICAM. In the constituent power, precisely because of the inadvertence in the revision, we have to come up with if we're going to follow the Bernas ruling, our own rules na po yun. So while we have couched this as resolution of both houses, what we are following, at least dito sa House, is Rule 21. And Rule 21 states that for constituent, yung exercise of the constituent power, we will be filing a resolution but following the procedures of a bill. So resolution siya, pero meron pa rin first, second, third reading, and the question now comes na kung magkakaroon ng BICAM. And this is precisely why we said, as early as possible, if we can trigger a justiciable controversy and the Supreme Court can now rule whether this would be sufficient to what we call yung Bernas Doctrine, that would be the answer to that. But as far as we're concerned, as a House that follows its own rules, we're just running with it po, no? And we see that in the same way the Senate is doing it. They have initiated RBH 6, but at that time, they did not have a counterpart to our Rule 21. And it was only a few weeks back, I believe, that there was a proposal that in the rules, they outright have a provision for constitutional amendment. So in the same respect, doon, we're not sure if they are following also the resolution of both houses, strictly in the sense of resolution of both houses. So what's important to note is this is exercise of constituent powers, not necessarily tied by the procedures of a legislative exercise of power. But at the end of the day, what is important is that it will end up in a plebiscite. Ang tao pa rin po ang magdedesisyon.
Thank you. I'd like to acknowledge Sheila Crisostomo of Philippine Star.
Ay, good afternoon po. Saan ang plano dun sa legislated wage hike? I-allow bang mag-hearing during the break or after na ng break? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that question. We will have yet to hear the decision of the House leadership, especially Speaker Martin Romualdez, with regards to conducting of hearings during the break. But following the nature of Speaker Martin Romualdez, that work never stops. So I won't be surprised if there will be an announcement that committee hearings will continue still during the break. Kasi nasa nature po talaga ni Speaker yon na dapat parati nagtatrabaho maski walang trabaho, dapat parati may ginagawa. So siguro antayin na lang natin yung magiging announcement po dito sa plenary. And yes, it will be tackled. Yes, it will be, and the discussions will continue, not only with the legislated wage hike, no, with other proposed legislation as well.
Thank you. For today's last question, Vic Sumintak from Net 25.
Sir, based on your statement na doon sa pagdating na mapagtibay na ng House yung RBH number 7 on Wednesday. So, you're expecting na mayroon at mayroong magdadala sa Supreme Court para questioning kung alin mang mga infirmities ng naturang aksyon ng House of Representatives. Sir, my question is, hindi kaya gagahulin na kayo sa oras because according to you, you are running out of time kasi hinabol natin na oras na huwag abutan ng October dahil election period na yon. Pag nadala ba sa Supreme Court, hindi ba kayo nangangamba na magkakaroon ng delay? Alam naman natin kung minsan ng Supreme Court, hindi agad-agad umaaksyon.
Actually, yung binanggit mo, yun talaga yung pangamba ko. Kaya nga, mahalaga na talaga na magkasundo na talaga yung House at Senate kasi nga, we're really pressed for time. And I've mentioned it many times in the past na yung window of opportunity natin, unting-unti na nagsasara. Kasi pagpasok po natin ng June pa lang, actually June, pagkasona ni Presidente dito sa atin, mag-uumpisa na yung budget season. So yung attention ng maraming mambabatas natin, nakafocus na sa pag-aaral at pagpapapasa ng 2025 budget. Pagpasok mo naman ng October, filing na of candidacy yan. So talagang lumiliit na po yung window natin dito. Kaya kami po ay hopeful talaga doon sa statements na binanggit ni Senate President Mig Zubiri na on track sila. So ang tanong na lang talaga dito kung on track sila, kailan at sana sa madaling panahon. Para sa ganon, yung issue ng constitutional challenge will have enough time to address. Yung issue ng when to have the plebiscite will have enough time to address. Because these are a lot of stumbling blocks that RBH 6 and RBH 7 will eventually have to hurdle. And if we have more time in hurdling these impediments, the sooner we can have the plebiscite and the sooner we can put in place the amendments in our Constitution.
In addition po, no, I'd just like to clarify na yung hinahabol natin po dito, I think, is in the practical sense. Hindi po siya porket matagal po yung proseso ng Supreme Court, let's say, hindi po legal impediment po yan to constitutional change. As we mentioned, constituent power naman po ito. This can coincide with election period, for example, or maybe even the Supreme Court might decide the question of having the plebiscite so close or even together with any election. But with that said, tama po, I agree definitely yung sinabi ni DS Suarez na in practical sense, urgent na po talaga siya. Kasi like you mentioned, we will be discussing the budget soon, and of course, with election, might come campaigning and the political aspects that come with it. So for practical purposes, the window is closing and we have to act now. Kaya po, we are urging also our colleagues in the Senate to give this due consideration. Yun lang po.
Thank you, sir. Do you have any closing statements?
Unang-una, maraming salamat sa oras at pagkakataon na naibigay nyo para muli po namin kayo maliwanagan na sana naman kayo naliwanagan sa mga usapin at mga issues na hinaharap ng ating bansa at maging dito sa House of Representatives. We have 3 more days of work ahead of us, and similar to what we have shown in the past, a lot of work will be done and a lot of work will be approved. In fact, we are set to fully comply 100% with all the legislative agenda and SONA priorities of our President. So, hindi lang po on track ang House of Representatives, advance pa kami sa trabaho namin. So, ganun din po yung nakita ninyo nung ipinasa po namin yung RB 87 na exhaustive, inclusive, at how else would you want to describe it? It was enlightening for a lot of us when we approved it, but we indeed are in the doors of history, and I do hope that our counterparts in the Senate will also grasp the same opportunity with the same fervor as us here in the House of Representatives. Kaya muli sa inyo lahat, maraming salamat.
Sa pamumuno po ni Speaker Martin Romualdez, napakadali po o mas dumali po ang aming trabaho bilang congressmen or congresswomen. Kinukumpara ko o inahambing ko sa dati kong stint bilang congressman. Ngayon po, binigyan kami ng magandang direksyon, magandang layunin po kung paano natin maiangat ang buhay ng halos lahat ng Pilipino sa ating bansa. At dahil po dito sa kanyang kasipagan, na-inspire po kami na maging masipag. As a matter of fact, ngayon pa lang, sa break, meron na po akong mga schedule ng mga committee hearings kahit break po namin. Dahil po gusto talagang maipasa ang mga measures na para makaangat ang buhay ng maraming Pilipino. Marami pong salamat.
Thank you po to our media friends who are here today. I hope nasagot po namin yung mga katanungan in a way that would clarify things. So closing statement lang, bilang member ng minority, I understand the sentiments ng ibang kababayan natin. Ako personally, there are some programs and projects that I don't agree with, but I hope that we keep the discussion at a civil level. Ang ating mga criticism po, let's keep it constructive. There is nothing to be gained when we resort to debasing ourselves and speaking ill na hindi naman po kinakailangan. So I hope that food for thought po for lahat ng mga nakikinig po ngayon. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman Rods, D.S. Suarez, Congressman Tony, and Congressman Jay for your participation. And to everyone, have a great day.